Welcome back to Review Crew. I'm Tim.
And I'm Laura. On today's episode, we're going to review Die Hard. Gabe and Cam are going on the spot to review Red Notice, and Andy has our student film review this week.
Here's the trailer for Die Hard.
It's Christmas Eve in L.A.
California.
Is Daddy coming home soon? Well, we'll see what Santa and Mommy can do, okay?
And New York cop John McClane has come to see his wife.
I missed you.
Instead, he's going to have to save her.
Sit down.
Within this skyscraper high above the city, 12 terrorists have declared war.
They're about to be taught a lesson in the real use of power.
They're as brilliant
Because I am interested in the $640 million in your vault.
as they are ruthless.
And I'm telling you, you're just gonna have to kill me. Okay. We do it the hard way.
Now, the last thing McClane wants
Think, damn it, think.
is to be a hero.
Where's Howie? Hey, Tucker! Where?
But he doesn't have a choice.
What does he think he's doing? They have already killed one hostage.
This channel is reserved for emergency calls only.
Lady, do I sound like I'm one of the pieces?
He's inside? Who is he?
Oh, you're nice.
Who are you then? You are most troublesome for a security guard.
Sorry, wrong guess, huh? Would you like to go for double jeopardy?
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay, You just destroyed a building. I am in charge of this situation. Well, I got some bad news for you. Come up here, that look like you're in charge of Jack. He's alone, he's tired, and he hasn't seen dipping squat from anybody down here.
Hey, pal, how you feeling?
All things being equal, I'd rather be in Philadelphia.
Only John can drive somebody that crazy.
He's an easy guy to like
Come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
and a hard man to kill. Bruce Willis, Die Hard.
Got invited to the Christmas party by mistake. Who knew?
And we're back. All right. So, Laura, I think we've both seen this movie beforehand, before watching it again for this review. But what were your initial? I'm curious. What were your initial thoughts when you first watched it, if you remember? And then what were your kind of thoughts seeing it again years later?
Right. Well, the first time I watched it, it was one of those things where I had always heard, oh, Die Hard. It's Die Hard. Like, I had heard it referenced so many times. I was kind of a tween. And I heard it's so violent, it's so scary. And I remember being so excited to finally watch it then, to be a big enough kid to watch it. And I have loved it since the first time I've seen it. It's one of my favorite action movies all around. I think it's got great characters, great action sequences, and so many memorable moments that are so iconic that I think really make it a standout movie.
I agree 100%. I remember when I first watched it, I was way younger, like a little kid, probably like 6 or 7 or 8, something like that. And I remember watching it with my dad and sitting down and like being like, "This is the coolest movie ever." And then I remember hearing like, "You let him watch Die Hard? That's nuts." And I was like, "Yeah, well, you know." And now years later, watching it again, it really did just like, it is not almost, I don't want to say the perfect action movie, but it is like really close. I think it's like just one of those, like, if you want to write an action movie, like look at the screenplay for Die Hard and just take notes on that, because it is just an awesome action movie.
Absolutely. Honestly, I love it because I think so many action movies kind of forget about character, and this one totally does not. You wouldn't expect it from a movie called Die Hard that it's going to have wonderful character growth, but it really did, and everybody has their own intentions. In particular, like, I love John McClane's, like, I love his character arc. I love that he eventually comes to reconcile his relationship with his wife and acknowledge the mistakes he made in his marriage as he's sitting on this point of death. And one of my favorite lines was, "She's heard me say I love you a million times, but she's never heard me say I'm sorry." And the fact that that was his reckoning, I just loved that. what about you? Did you have any favorite characters?
Yeah, John McClane is a classic action hero. Loved him and loved his growth. For me, also, Sergeant Powell was huge. I think he actually has a very kind of a topical story that like is still, he's a cop who accidentally discharged his weapon in the line of duty and killed a young boy, and now he's trying to live that, trying to move past that and get over that grief and trying to reclaim his kind of sense of duty while he's on the job. And so, that comes full circle at the end when he saves John and his wife. So I think that character arc is really something that's, like you said, like you wouldn't expect to find such character growth and development in an action movie. But this is one of those kind of early action movies that still realizes that character is important. And Sergeant Powell's one character that really exemplifies that growth. And especially his relationship with John, how they both kind of help each other throughout the course of the film. I thought that was a really nice dynamic. So he was another favorite of mine. And I think another character we really need to talk about is Hans Gruber, the main villain. I mean, come on, he's iconic. Alan Rickman, like one of my favorites. He does an absolutely standout job. You have any favorite moments with him in the movie?
Oh gosh, I'd have to say my favorite moment with him is when he pretends to be an American. John confronts him and he's pointing the gun at him, and he puts on this fake American accent and is acting like he's all scared. And John McClane hands him a gun and then walks away and he points the gun at him. Of course, it's not loaded because he suspected him. But just seeing like him adapt to you're watching an actor play an actor almost, which was really interesting to see an actor who really understands everything about this character and can swap in and out. Did you have any favorite moments with him?
Yeah, I do like also that moment's a great moment, and then also when he is talking with John's wife's coworker. I can't remember the name, it slipped my mind, but kind of the cocky coworker who thinks he can handle the whole hostage situation. And Hans kind of invites him in, and he's like all warm and welcoming. Then he ends up shooting him dead. But it's a very much kind of like, okay, like an actor just working, like very casual kind of moment where he plays it off very calmly. And then he kind of makes that full 180 and does a flip on you, and it's a really big surprising moment for the audience. So I really enjoyed that. And I also do enjoy a little fun fact at the end when John unleashes his wife's watch and then Hans Gruber falls down to his death. That was not an unscripted moment, but they were going to release him on the count of 3, and they released him on the count of 2. So that was a real look of genuine shock and terror in Alan Rickman's eyes, which I thought was really cool. And I was like, wow, that was a really great acting moment. But I guess he was just fully 100% terrified.
Oh, you can say, yeah, you can see his eyes widen in that moment. Yeah, truly, this is although it does star John McClane, this is an ensemble movie. There are so many characters, each with their own drives. And one thing I noticed this time watching it, I guess with a critical film view, was looking at the power dynamics between every character. When Alan Rickman walks in, he's speaking to, I believe his name is Tayaki, the boss. He's saying, you've expressed, or your company has done these things in all of these countries, but we're going to show you what a real display of power looks like. And you see that reflected in so much of the movie where everybody's trying to gain control from the actual action to the chain of command in the police to the news reporter and his coworker who he obviously hates. Did you notice any of those moments?
Yeah, now that you had mentioned it, that was really interesting. Thinking back, especially on the reporter, even at the smallest kind of level, where it's just one reporter kind of, talking about the situation, he goes and he's obviously abusive to his coworker, and he's also kind of tries to take power in the situation with John McClane's kids to interview them about the whole situation, which is just a scummy move, but he kind of thrives off that power. So it was really interesting to kind of think about now, that power dynamic that stretches from the smallest level all the way up to the main players in the actual Nakatomi Tower. So that was actually a really interesting point, and I thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, it was something I don't think I expected to go into that level of analysis on Die Hard,
Yeah.
but I heard that one line and started watching for it throughout the movie. And one of my favorite bits is just the stress they have about who's in charge of the police investigation. And then when the FBI men go up in the helicopter and eventually blow up, one of the characters says, I think we're going to need a few more FBI guys. I think this movie made a lot of light-hearted moments out of what would be terrifying. How did you feel the humor played into this?
Yeah, a big part of it. I thought it was almost as much of a comedy as it was an action movie because, John McClane is such kind of New York cop, kind of just out of his element, fish out of water. So it really made for a lot of great comedic moments that I thought made a really nice blend, kind of like with the Marvel movies that you see now, where it's like they take a lot of action, but they take a lot of humor too. This was kind of a blueprint for that. So that's kind of interesting to think about too. And I thought it was a really good mix that worked really well for the screen.
Yeah, I think everything from his physicality to some quippy one-liners, there were so many fun moments in it that even when you're shaking and hoping he's doing okay, you're still cracking up.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be right back after this.
All right, and we're back. Okay, Tim, obviously this is an action movie with a ton of amazing points. What was your favorite action sequence?
There are a lot of good ones to choose from. Tough choice, but I think when it comes down to it, my favorite one is just the rooftop sequence with all the hostages and the helicopter coming in, because there's so many components. You've got the group of hostages, you've got John McClane who's right downstairs fighting the terrorists to get upstairs. Then you've got the helicopter with the FBI agents flying in. Then you've got the bombs going off and John's jumping off the rooftop and he's got the rope to swing into the glass window. There's just so many moving components, and it's all super story-based too, so a good action sequence I think really drives the story forward. And that is just like the climax almost of the movie where it pushes John into that final confrontation. And so I think that's just my favorite because of the so many moving pieces, but also because of the story that drives the actual sequence itself.
That was such an amazing moment. I remember the tension is so high. I think they set up a lot of amazing points. I'd have to say one of my favorites, and especially the first time I watched it, it got me, was when he's in one of the renovated floors, or the floors being renovated, and the bad guys shoot out the glass. And one thing that's so unique about this movie is John McClane is barefoot the entire movie, which is such, you wouldn't even think about that, but that's such it's cutting you off at the feet. It's making your life so much harder going through these things, that I thought that was a really interesting choice for the story. And I remember they said shoot out the glass, and at that moment I was like, oh my gosh, that would be so painful. So it really shows his character that he is willing and able to get across that. That's how determined he is. And the same with the gun taped to his back. Such an iconic image now, but that was one of the really clever moments in the script for me.
Yeah, and speaking of that broken glass too, that's kind of a questionable moment, I think, for the audience. Oh, geez, you're walking on broken glass, your feet are getting bloodied up. You're going to get an infection at some point, right?
Oh, gosh.
So I think it's kind of interesting to think, how many times would John McClane have kind of not actually made it if this was a super realistic and not like a movie?
Yeah, I was going to say, if anything issued I find in the movie, it's just, this man survives so much.
Yeah.
One scene in particular that always makes me laugh is him falling down the elevator shaft and catching this tiny little ledge.
Yep.
So that was one of those moments that kind of took me out of it a little bit. What about you? Do you have any of those moments?
Yeah, definitely the elevator, and there was, I think, quite a few explosions that would have probably, I don't know, he might not have made it out of. The rooftop explosion is awesome, but it's kind of questionable. There's a lot of heat there, a lot of force. And it was funny, I think a YouTube video was actually made about how many times would John McClane actually survive, and they brought in a doctor, and it was he actually would have died 9 times throughout the course of the movie. So yeah, there are those moments where there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but if you go into it knowing it's an action movie, whatever, you just have fun with it, it's okay. You can believe that John McClane, this ultimate superhero, basically survives all this.
All right, now obviously this movie is very controversial for one reason, and I have to ask you this question. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes, yes. Die Hard is a Christmas movie in my ever so humble opinion. I think when you think of Christmas movies, I mean, obviously it takes place around Christmas, which is the big one, which Die Hard does, but that alone in itself wouldn't be really enough. My argument really lies in most Christmas movies are about family and connection, I think. You know, you look at Elf and like A Christmas Story, these classics that have these families coming together. That's what Die Hard is. John McClane is on this mission to not only take out the terrorists, but to reconnect with his wife and his kids. He just wants to get back to his family. And in the end, he eventually does. So I think that's what makes Die Hard the ultimate Christmas movie.
You know what? I love that analysis of it. I was going to say what I think makes it a Christmas movie is it takes place at a Christmas party, and I think that's just such a funny premise. But I have a tradition of watching this every year at Christmas time, so I'm biased in this, but it is definitely a Christmas movie.
Absolutely. All right, so now that we've talked about it a little bit, what is your final rating for Die Hard?
You know what? Going at it from simply a love of this movie perspective with a little bit of actual criticism built in, I think I'd give it 8.5 out of 10. It's absolutely one of my favorites. Some suspension of disbelief, but it's such a classic. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go 8 out of 10. Great movie, really had a lot of fun with it. There is the suspension of disbelief a little bit, and it's still, action movies aren't my favorite. They're good fun, but this one did have that character growth and development that made it more than a little bit of an action movie, so I think that gives it some points. So I'm going to go 8 out of 10. Great movie, a lot of fun, and a Christmas movie for sure.
Wonderful. We'll be right back after this.
And that's all for this week. If you want to follow more Review Crew content, go to the Review Crew Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, as well as Orange TV Network on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and YouTube.
Find the Review Q's podcast on Spotify or on our website at orangetvnetwork.syr.edu, where you can also find our blog and more OTN information.
Be sure to check out Friday Night Movie Night on OTN. This week's movies are His Girl Friday, Little Shop of Horrors, and Attack of the Giant Leeches.
See you next semester.